So those are just some of the ways that we keep up. We also communicate with the Atlanta field office, and you may have a different office that you work with, but we have a very good rapport with them. And then we communicate among ourselves. I mean, before Frank passed on, it was the John and Larry and Frank show. We probably talked, every other week or so, and email even more often than that, just because we'd run into stuff, and I've called Larry during an inspection, he's called me during an inspection, build up rapport with some of your fellow inspectors that you feel comfortable with and make phone calls. Everybody's always willing to help, but because none of us know it all. None of us will ever know it all. Every situation is different, but as long as we communicate among ourselves, we can usually find out an answer pretty reasonably. And the commission has been great in working with us.
They really have.
Yeah, they have done really well, especially when it comes to translators.
Yeah.
That's where we've had a lot of bumps along the way. But anyway, go ahead.
Develop a good attitude. Because I'm an old Southern boy, so I'm sort of probably the original mild-mannered Clark Kent, I guess. I don't go in with a coat and tie, and a suit and everything, and I go in like one of the guys.
Yeah.
Like I say, I don't have a receipt book for them to sign for a fine or something, so I go in with a good attitude and chat with the engineer and chat with the manager and just let them know that you're there to help them. That's what your job. You're actually working for them that day to help them become compliant and if any questions they have, but just enjoy. And it's a fun job. It really is. I enjoy going around and looking at other stations.
Yeah, this is our inspection attire that we have on today. Now, if I'm working in a large market, say like in Atlanta, then I'm going to have a long sleeve button down collar shirt. And because I'm going to be meeting general managers and radio and TV stations we could always wish to work for and stuff like that. So I think you have to look at the situation really carefully, and your appearance means an awful lot, because if you're running around the station and everybody else is dressed better than you, that's not a good impression.
That's right.
So, but yet at the same time, the day before I was doing the Atlanta trip, I was at a site where I was up to my ankles in water because it was a downpour and it was a beautiful AM site, but they had had a flood and there was 4 inches of water out there, and we were going out to the transmitter site. So I had jeans and waterproof shoes on, and I knew that's where I was headed. So you have to use your own good judgment on this stuff, but always look professional. That's the key to it.
And don't look like you're going in there that you're going to embarrass anybody. You're not there to slap their wrist. You're just there to be a friend and help them through it. Learn good people skills, to talk to people and share things with them. Also some technical skills. You sort of need to know how radio and how television basically works, and so you can understand what the guys are doing and if they have a problem or something like that. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert on digital audio workstations or DX50s or anything like that, but a general knowledge, of how Marconi made this work in the beginning. Listening, be a good listener, and because usually they got a lot of good things to say and they can share things. So listen to what they're saying, and that'll go a long way. Documentation is a really big thing because, as John said, we keep all the records of stuff where we go and inspect. And when I go, every 3 years, when I go back to that station, I'll pull the report from the last time I inspect them and go through it. Normally what will happen is you write up 2 different reports. One is if you inspect a station that passed, that everything, when you didn't see anything wrong, you sort of send them a thank you letter of being part of the Alabama ABIP program, and during the inspection on such and such a date, there were no issues observed, la la la. Then if you find issues that need to be addressed, then you send a report to the engineer and or the general manager, and you outline the issues that you found. Now you talk about those, or I do, before I leave. And I tell them, and they'll start writing them down. I said, well, you don't have to write them down. I'm going to send you a written report, but I want you to know about them as we go through the inspection, so you don't get shocked when I send a report and you see something. Well, I didn't know about that. Well, I don't ever put anything in a report, and I don't know how you do it, but that I haven't talked to them about
Yeah.
while I'm at the site. That
Yeah.
way it.
Don't leave the facility without talking to whoever runs the technical department or whoever the person was that brought you in. And I mean, and it varies. And also, make some contact with the general manager while you're there. Let them know why you're there. They may have been the one to bring you in. Then you want to sit down with them, review. The local engineer who you're dealing with may take you into the GM's office and you review all the information with them, or it may be a director of engineering who's over a group of engineers in that same operation. But spend time, review everything with them so that they have a full understanding of what's going on, and then your report becomes a summary of that meeting that you had. And in the report too, I always, and I know Larry does, is I usually cut and paste out of the self-inspection form because it's a great little brief explanation, and it always has the rules and everything that you're pertaining to, so you want to pass that information on to them and put that in the document as well, because they need information to be able to correct it, because 9 out of 10 times, or 9.5 out of 10 times, you're going to be back there in a short period of time, or they're going to be sending you an email with justification that they have completed whatever issues they had. And you need that information, and you want that relationship to be very good, very understanding, so when you walk back in there, you can say, oh, you've got it all done, or no, you didn't finish it, here's what's wrong, and you're going to have to go through those same people again.
Indiana wants me to go a little further. They want me to go to the actual rule, not just the rule number, and copy and paste the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also go to where the fines are and say this would have, or possibly could have cost
Yeah.
you.
And that's fine. Larry and I've talked about that a little bit, because it's kind of hard to guess what the fines are going to be in that kind of situation.
For EIF is, $10,000,
Yeah.
$12,000. So, and it could be each issue.
Yes.
And I explained
Yeah.
that.
And the other thing,
And 10 issues starts.
the only reason why I don't do the rules is because if I'm going to a station that has a lot of issues, the rules may take pages. I mean, some of the rules are very, very involved. Now, I do go with most of my stations, and I give handouts. Like if they've got a lot of public file issues, I have a handout that gives summaries of public files, quarterly issues, programs, and all that kind of stuff with them. If there's confusion with the chief operator duties, then there's a document that Larry and I both have, and Larry really was the developer of this, but explains everything a chief operator is supposed to do with sample forms and his responsibilities. So I always have leave-behinds like that for him as well too. So you work as a contractor for your respective state broadcasters association, and every state's going to be different. And I feel like providing more information and giving the information is very important, but at the same time I feel like it's the responsibility of the person who's getting this information. You're giving the rules, they need to go look it up and read it a little bit too. On their part, they have to meet you 50-50. That's just my personal feeling. So, but remember, you do work for your association. Yes, Keith.
All right, you've had an inspection, you've left them with a report of things they need to address. They send you the email that says, we've addressed them. Do you accept that at face value? Or where do you figure out that you need to return business?
It depends. It just depends. If it's a major EAS logging issue, I mean, I have a station right now I've got to stop in and see soon, because they had all their tests. They had everything there. But there was a case of where the chief operator didn't sign the logs. Now, I want to see him go through and check everything and sign the logs. I'm going to go and check. I want to go back and check. And when he said, okay, am I supposed to put the date that I did this or the date of the logs? I said, you speak to your legal counsel, because I'm not going to give that information, however legal counsel has. But that would be a case I'd go back. Now, let's say they were missing their last NRSC measurement for an AM. If they enclose a copy of that measurement, then I find that acceptable. Or if there was another document they missed. TVs are really good about having all these measurements there, but occasionally one gets misplaced and they have to get it from the consulting engineer that provided the measurement, and I'll get a copy of it, then I won't go back. Public file, I can look online. So that's usually the big one, but if it's major EAS problems and stuff like that, I'm going to go back and visit. But you have to use your own judgment, and also you have to work within the confines of your association. You know, do you charge the second trip? Do you not charge the second trip? All that has to be worked out ahead of time with your association, so you need to know how to prep for that part of it as
The
well.
fixed
too.
fence around the tower sample you had.
Yeah.
Did you set that at face value, or?
I had them
mean,
sent.
that's a huge one.
The one that I had, they sent me a picture.
Yeah, if they send you a
Okay.
picture,
Yeah,
if they
sent me a
send you a
of it.
picture, that would be acceptable. But let me tell you, hang on to those documents, because if something ever comes back, here's what they sent me and here's why I went on and passed them. So,
And I'm assuming you took pictures along the way for
Yeah.
each of yours,
Yeah.
and put them as part of your,
I don't
either in your
necessarily.
file or maybe as
Yeah,
part
I
of your
usually have
report.
pictures of sites that I go to. I don't usually necessarily send them back to the station.
No, no.
But
No,
I,
Your files.
they're more just for my information when I'm writing up my report and stuff like that, and I can verify at a later date. I mean, I had a station. Their old transmitter site and studio has been abandoned, but they still own the site, and the tower was rusting. And I had the director of engineering, which was really funny because I drove right by it to go to their new site and everything. He says, "You're going to find that in bad shape." Well, sure enough, I did. So I wrote them up for it, didn't pass the station. So he called me about 4 weeks later and said, "We've gotten the tower painted." Well, I went and looked at it, and I happened to be going that way because it's right on a main highway that I travel a lot, so I could see it when I go by. And I may or may not have, in that case, gone back because I know the individual, and a lot of these people you will know, and there's a trust factor there. I mean, if Frank told me he had his tower painted yesterday, I have no reason not to believe Frank, because I've known Frank for a long time and he's always been an honest person. Larry has told me otherwise, but I mean, yeah, I bet. But I mean, those are all judgment calls. We're human beings, so.
How do you handle possible, and you touched on this just a little bit ago, conflicts of interest in being an engineering firm and then also walking into a station that would be on some level a client?
Oh, great station. Well,
That
first
is-
of all, if the station is some level of client, I don't go inspect them. It's
Is
just,
that part of the ABIP rules that are best practice? Or
yes, we were on a committee that helped develop best practices. I will not inspect a station that I do any work for under any circumstance. As a matter of fact, Larry's getting ready to do a couple of stations for me. And I don't really do work for this group, but they've asked me to be on call for one of their stations. And I go over every couple of weeks and just read the meters. And the station's not even in the same state, but I'm not going to take that. Now, I had a couple of instances where the group has said, "Look, we want you to do the inspection. We know you've done work, or we've purchased from you before."
Right.
And I said, "Well, I really don't want to do this," but they say, "We know you'll be honest, we'll be fine. And if it's acceptable to the director of the association and it's acceptable to those people, that's a different situation." But and it had been months earlier that I'd ever done anything for them. So I'm very cognizant of that. And because I don't want anybody to ever say anything about relationship. And that's another thing. We've worked together, and Keith and I have talked, and then we've had other people. All of us are going to run into conflicts from time to time. I recently went to Tennessee because of a conflict and helped out. So we all kind of look after each other. We're kind of like doctors. You're not going to perform surgery on your own family, or you're not supposed to, or something like that. So I do watch that, and I respect that. And that's a really good question, because I think that's important. I don't think a contractor who works on a regular basis on stations would be expected to inspect the station he's working for, nor would I want him to inspect the station he's working for.
What we have is like the consolidation of contract engineering practices, and maybe it's not Nate that walks into a station, but our company we both work for might service both, you know, like he may be the daily presence somewhere, whereas I would be then. It just seems like tricky. And the more that you see that companies, you know, you can see like a General Dynamics or something one day, 1/3 of what we do, you know, could be a company like that.
Well, I think we have to cross those bridges as we come to them.
Right.
I think that's something you have to be very concerned and respectful of. I mean, not promoting anything, but I have a company that sells broadcast equipment, for example.
Precisely.
And I don't want to cross that line, but I have had a customer who has asked me to come in and do their ABIP inspection. And I said, no, I don't want to do it. But they wanted me to because they know I knew the rules, and they were concerned about a person that had been doing their inspection that was non-related to the ABIP program. And we actually did do it. I didn't charge them anything for it. I gave them a report. I didn't want any concern, but even the director of engineering of the group wanted me to come in and do that. And so in that case I did, and I did find some issues. And I think you have to come to those one at a time, but I think that's something you have to avoid at all costs
Yeah,
until
like
you
the
get to
general
that
guidance
point
is
that you,
solid.
yeah, you can't do that. I mean, Josh Bone, who helped sponsor this group,
Great example.
we work together. We're friends. We've known each other for a long time. But if he's dealing with a station that's related in any way to me whatsoever, I'm not going to inspect that station. I'm just not going to do it. Now, we may all get to a point in our careers and in this industry where, you know, there are 10 owners and they own all the stations, and it's not going to matter. You're going to have to do it no matter what. But I'm not worried about that anytime soon. But I respect your, you know, concern. That's something we all have to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a question about TV power tolerance. You know, traditionally it's been 80 to 110%. The way the regulation's actually written is that it's 80 to 110% of your licensed visual power. So obviously there's no visual power anymore for DTV. So,
Yeah.
you know, what do you guys think about, I mean, do you think it's still 80 to 110? Is it something different? Is it, I mean,
That's one of those situations that the rules have not kept up with
Right.
the technology. And
When I go in and look, I look for 90 to 105 really is what I'm looking at. I kind of lean toward the FM side of it. There are exceptions to that rule, but there is no more analog. It's only digital. I mean, it's like checking the modulation. Yeah, there is no modulation to check in digital. So the rules are outdated. So we have to. I think you have to just use your own good judgment. I mean, very few TV stations I walk into, I have to worry about that they're 90% or lower in operating power. Most of them are right on the money, or very, very close, or they're in the process of getting ready to change out a tube or clystro, and that's a different situation there.
this actually came up for me within the last 2 or 3 weeks. I had an ABIP station call me and ask the question. In the first place, a few weeks ago when I had done the inspection, you know, they had a transmitter that they were trying to baby. It's being replaced in the repack, and they were right at like 83. And I'm not sure that they even could have come up.
Right.
So that's still between 80 and 110, but
Right.
it's way at the bottom. On the other hand, they just called me and said, we just replaced a transmitter, and we want to burn it in real good to make sure that we find any issues with it. So they wanted to run it at 110 for a little while, you know. That's, again, within the tolerance.
And in
within
that
the
situation and in those circumstances, that's when I would advise them to check with their legal counsel, their communications attorney, and ask him for advice.
And actually,
because-
in point of fact, I did that.
Yeah,
Point to
because
Yeah.
that's a situation of I'm not saying that they are, but that could be misconstrued as taking advantage of the old analog rules in favor of digital. And I wouldn't want to touch that with a hot, with a 10-foot pole. I would say check with your legal counsel on that, and handle it that way, because you don't want that responsibility on your shoulders. It's a good question. It's one of those cases of where analog is still in the rules, and yet we've been operating digital now for a long period of time, and the rules haven't kept up.
The SBE just finally took all the NTSC questions out of the certification test. I mean, they were still stuck in there, lot of NTSC questions, but they finally took those out of the certification exam because there is no NTSC anymore. So,
any other questions?
I got a few slides we'll run through here and then we'll end. Real quick note, we just found out they've got a problem in the building that all the toilets don't work anymore. They don't know whether it's all the rain, but every one of them is backed up.
Oh, no.
So all 4. So there's a his and her sycamore tree out here. Real quick, let me just run through these and then we'll end. Doesn't really have much to do about ABIP, but just some good engineering practice. John and I have talked about it, even though we never want to step on, or I never want to step on a engineer's toes. He or she is doing a good job, and I don't want to go in and get onto them for things that they're doing. But you can sort of use reverse psychology sometimes, and if you see something that doesn't look right, there's a gentleman's way to talk about it, and maybe, as the guy said that was a recording engineer, he's a mastering engineer, he said when somebody sends him a mix of a song for him to master, and he listens to it, and there's something not right on it, he will call up the mix engineer, and what he'll say is, because he doesn't want to step on their toes either, what he'll say is, how did you feel about your mix? Was there anything that you heard before you sent it to me that was not? He said, oh yeah, what did you hear, Bob? Well, I thought maybe if you made just a little change here, yeah, I heard that too. Well, you can do that on this. If you ask them, how do you feel about the way such and such is working? And so you can do that and be helpful to people with good engineering practice. And we'll just fly through these because we're getting through with time. Keep in mind this, that the engineer, this is the key. If you're in radio or television as well, that's the key right there. That's the only thing that matters, is what comes out of the speaker that counts. Everything you do at that facility, that's where the end of it is where it comes out of Aunt Susie's radio. Listen to the morning show. So from the microphone all the way to the antenna, that's what really counts. So real quickly, things like this, if you see something like that, obviously that's not, you can delicately, without stepping on his toes, say something about that. If you drive up to a site like this, and you can't get in the front door, that's usually something.
We see more of those than you'd believe.
I know it. Guy anchors are like this. I mean, where they're grown up, and you can't really get to the guy anchors.
Well, they're falling apart right at the ground level where they've rusted.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Obviously, you couldn't even get down there to that tower very well. That will actually decrease your efficiency too. If you have growth around an AM tower, especially bushes or anything that's within the ground field, it doesn't necessarily throw off your impedance of the tower, or resistance of the tower, but it cuts down on the efficiency of the transmission.
Yeah, and you shouldn't be expected to go into a situation like that because, there could be hazard snakes and stuff like that in the field. I did go to one AM that the growth was so much inside the fence I refused to go in there.
Yeah.
So.
He's had a nice experience with this one time.
Yeah, I was doing an inspection down along South Carolina coast, and the engineer, he said, oh, the door's open, go on in the building, and I walked up a couple of steps, and I don't know why I opened the door, and he told me the light switch was just inside the door frame, and I stopped, and I had just enough light to realize that in this picture the light switch would have been butt up right to here. I'd have stuck my hand in the breaker box if I wouldn't have been careful. So while again we as a group don't deal with OSHA issues, that is still something, you know, you really ought to put the cover on this box. I could have almost stuck my hand in there, or worse than that, you could have stuck your hand in there and get electrocuted. So you want to at least advise them on some safety issues like that, because that's just a disaster waiting to happen. God forbid the GM may go out there one day and electrocute himself. Well, you may, you know, but anyway, that's unacceptable.
John, is that something you want to include in your written report? Because that doesn't
I
really fall under scope.
Actually, I probably, on a situation like that, and the one that I had on the coast, I did include it in my written report. I'll say, while this is not part of our normal inspection, I did note that there was no cover on the main service entrance of the building with breakers, and this is a serious hazard that should be looked into immediately.
No wiring inspector would have passed that with wires coming out of the
I know it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
box anyway.
They're
I
not
know,
even going
but
to.
you'd be surprised. You walk into this, and what it is, it's a temporary thing. Look, I had an
Look at
emergency.
these,
Yeah,
some resistors right there.
yeah.
doing
Look at
something.
this.
Probably
But
voltage sample.
but right here, maybe he just ran a feed to a low power transmitter to get him back on the air, and he was going to put the cover back on. He never did. I was at a site. 2 months ago, I think it was. Matter of fact, Larry and I were talking about it the other day. We'd both been there, and the engineer had an emergency, put in a temporary transmitter. He took the cover off the breaker box so he could put the service in. He can't find the cover to the breaker box. I mean, I was stunned. I told the owner, I said, if that would have been me, I'd have been fired on the spot. But I mean, those are things you don't want to happen. I'm off my soapbox now. This one's yours, Larry.
Huh? That's mine. No.
Yeah. No, it's not really Larry's, but
No.
it is.
Neatness counts. So
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, technically it's working, but technically it's not. It's not very, do a little job. We were laughing about this this morning, that somebody, it's been there a long time, because you can see the wrench is actually rusted, holding the ground strap on. This is just, there's one of the red signs that we were talking about on that particular tower, and the ASR on that one. We didn't talk much about this, but especially FM and television need to have pressure on them, nitrogen to keep the moisture from building up in them. And when I'm at an FM or an AM, I mean FM or TV, I will always look to see, although it's not part of the ABIP program, that's just something you need to do, is keep the pressure on it. Not sure what that was about. I guess that breaker kept tripping or something. So you don't want to do that. That's not an approved ground. A bucket with dirt in it and a rod stuck in it. I'm not sure. No, that's not. This guy, I always tell people to seal the building to keep the rodents and the bugs and everything out. He didn't quite understand how that can spray worked, I think, and just went overboard. This is my favorite. This is a fuse chart.
I like the audio visual auto alert version.
That's right. You can use a pop top will do about 130 amps. What's happening in the future? Some things that come along that's going to affect ABIP programming. I'm sure ATSC3 for television, the next generation television. I'm sure that's going to be added onto the plate for ABIPs, because it's entirely different. And the AWARN system, which is the new, not replacing EAS, but it's the way emergency messages are going to be implemented and distributed in ATSC 3.0. So that's just something to keep with. That sort of ends our presentation today. And if you've got any other questions, we'll be around for a while.